The information contained herein is intended to help the viewer successfully navigate common IRS and Department of Labor requirements to help achieve successful results from their IRA. The information is not intended to replace information from your legal counsel or income tax professional. IRA Club does not offer or sell any investment. All investments have risk.
Welcome back to the IRA Club podcast. Kasia Baldus here. I'm here with my coworker, Dan. We are really excited to have you join us on this week's podcast. This year, a lot has happened, a lot of changes. So we wanted to take the time as we're getting towards the end of the year. I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about your goals for 2025. Just wanted to do a little reflection, and we wanted to talk about how politics really makes a difference within your IRAs, your personal funds as well. So I have Dan here, who is the expert on that topic. So we're going to dive deep and go over politics and how it affects your financial future. I have Daniel Bamford here with me, and Daniel is part of the client care team. So Dan, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone how you got started with IRA Club, and more importantly, why are you so passionate about politics and some of the topics that you're going to be covering today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Kasia. My name is Dan Bamford. I have been with the IRA Club for a little bit over a year and a half, and I've been interested in financial markets and in the financial sector for quite a while. And so I figured that getting to know retirement accounts would be a great way to transition into the private sector. And my background is in economics and in politics. I've worked on a variety of political campaigns and for a few quasi-government agencies, and I have a lot of background in working with elected officials, as well as at IRA Club, I work with small businesses to help set up retirement accounts for them as well.
Wow, that is a lot. And I mentioned in a previous podcast, we have a lot of employees here that have various backgrounds, which I think is really great because it just sort of gives our team a different point of view and really sheds some light on some things. So I think that's really valuable that you have that and are able to bring that to IRA Club. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. It's funny because Kasia and I agreed that we were going to be doing this podcast the weekend of Thanksgiving. And then since then, there has been so many things happening around the world. So as everyone knows, Donald Trump won the 2024 presidential election a little bit over a month ago. Republicans won the House and the Senate, and of course, Republicans maintained control of the Supreme Court from Donald Trump's previous administration. There has been some updates in the Middle East as well. It is looking very likely that peace in the Middle East is going to be attainable, at least vis-a-vis the Gaza war, the war in Lebanon, and at least some aspects of the Syrian civil war. Recently, Germany's government and France's government have actually both suffered a collapse for two slightly different reasons, and those have both had a big impact on the German and French stock markets in particular. And just about a week and a half ago, South Korea underwent a brief period of martial law, and South Korean stock has been down since then. There is also looking like there is more potential for peace in Ukraine, which would have a big impact on inflation outlook, have a big deal for Americans, both for day-to-day spending and on saving for their future. And just recently, we also found out that there's going to be a cut in interest rates in Europe. So a lot of things that have been going on, and we'll get to how this will all impact your retirement account.
Perfect. Yeah, it sounds like a plan. Again, a lot of changes, and I think a lot of people have taken this year a little bit slowly when it comes to investments. We have seen that a little bit of hesitation on what's going to happen. But again, we want to take a few minutes to go over some of these topics. You might be thinking that they might not be related to your retirement funds, but they are. So Dan is going to go ahead and kind of go over them. And again, just we'll give you some pointers and some tips on maybe why using a tax sheltered account could be beneficial for your future with some of these changes happening.
Absolutely. So let's first start with some things that we are pretty sure we know are going to be changing. First, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of Donald Trump's first administration is set to actually expire at the end of 2025. That is also known as the Trump tax cuts. And seeing as Republicans have won both the House and the Senate, it is likely that those are going to be extended and deepened. And there's also very likely that we're going to see a variety of regulatory rollback in the sense of many asset classes are likely to be receiving less government scrutiny. The asset classes I'm thinking in particular on this would be crypto and a lot of land or resource exploitation is likely to benefit from this.
Yeah. And is that, are those asset classes something that the IRA Club member can invest in? Tech, crypto, land?
Absolutely. IRA Club clients are more than welcome to invest into all of these varieties of asset classes. We do offer crypto, land, and then, of course, specific natural resource exploitation options as well, and a variety of other investments, standard equities as well.
Perfect. Yeah. So we are going to be talking a little bit about the stock market, but we just want to also drive home the point that we are talking about real estate, cryptocurrency, precious metals, and those are the type of investments that IRA Club members can invest in, unlike some of our other classic brokerage firms out there where they cannot. So that's why we're here, is to educate you about the different asset classes and, again, how politics ties into those asset classes.
Yes, absolutely. And speaking about how politics is going to tie into asset classes, I think it's important that we take a quick look at what inflation is likely to be.
Yeah, let's cover that.
So we have in the 2020s, we've actually seen some of the highest and some of the lowest inflation in recent American history, which is rather interesting. However, looking forward, it's very likely that government spending is going to be higher than what it was previously, as well as taxes are likely to be lowered, as previously mentioned. So there is likely going to be more of a gap in the debt burden within the United States in terms of the money that the federal government receives and the money that the federal government need to pay out for its yearly expenditures, which this would likely result in much more borrowing as well as higher inflation. And this has a very, very big impact on your IRA on your personal funds in general, as if you are, spending more at the grocery store, if you are spending more when you're going to the doctor, if you're spending more when you're going on vacation, you are going to have less to be able to, put away for your retirement account. Or alternatively, if you are putting away, if you're putting away everything that you can into your retirement account, it's important to keep in mind that growth that you will see in that retirement account is very important to monitor that and to ensure that you're going to be able to beat inflation moving forward. And so that's why it's very important to take advantage of the various tax sheltered accounts that are offered, such as health savings accounts, Coverdales, and of course IRAs.
Yeah, absolutely. So right. So getting these funds into tax sheltered accounts is number one. And then number two would be to go ahead and get those funds invested. So the funds are growing faster than inflation. So again, and things that we'll be discussing on future episodes. So yeah, thank you for explaining that, because I definitely spend a lot at the grocery store and I feel like I come home and have nothing to eat.
Of course.
So
Yeah.
very frustrating.
It is quite frustrating.
Yeah.
It's also very interesting looking at how interest rates have been cut recently. I am of the opinion that the cut in interest rates is likely going to further stimulate inflation, even further putting the impetus on ensuring that you have retirement accounts or other tax sheltered accounts so that the gains are protected and you're not consistently having that haircut.
So yeah, so Dan, so we covered inflation. We know that the money is feels like it's just getting thinner and thinner. And you talked a little about the debt. So at the end of the day, who's going to be paying for all of this, and who's gonna see the effect of this?
Of course, we should take into account. We should look at who is going to be impacted, who's going to benefit, and who won't benefit.
Yes.
And I think the best way of looking at this would be looking at this from essentially a demographic angle. So, for everyone listening at home, if you would be able to pull up on Google just a picture of the United States population pyramid, and I'd be kind of happy to kind of go through how the demographics have a major impact on investing in the United States and investing in general.
Mhm.
So, just to start, there's four primary generations that are in the workforce at the moment. There are the baby boomers, who are the highest in the totem pole. There are the Generation Xers, the millennials, as well as the Zoomers, Gen Z, which is what I am a part of. Um, and so we see an interesting dichotomy in the workforce at the moment, as predominantly baby boomers and millennials are encouraging working in the office, and Generation X is more in favor of working from home, with Zoomers being a little bit more split. This has an impact in many, many, many ways, and one of those important ways of looking at this is looking at it from an asset class perspective. IRA Club, many of our clients invest into real estate, into a variety of different specific real estate asset classes. So taking into account, just for example, how people of different ages and of different seniorities in the workforce interact, I think is very useful for thinking ahead on how people could potentially benefit or not benefit from any given um, burst in inflation or preferential asset treatment. That said, when young people, 20-year-olds, are first entering the workforce, they are young, they are relatively inexperienced, and they're mostly consuming and taking on debt.
Yes.
That is in contrast to, say, 40-year-olds who are much more well established in their career. They are saving for their retirement, but they are also spending a lot on the raising of their family. Then there are 60-year-olds getting, close to retirement. They are earning a very large amount of money, as well as being able to save most of that money, as well as their expenses are lower. And then, so for those three groups of essentially general workers, 20-year-olds are likely to be feeling the pain of the inflation the most.
Mm.
The younger people are likely to be feeling the pain of the inflation the most, due to lower wages and less assets available. Uh, I would argue that the real winners in this higher inflation environment would likely be more so the 40-year-olds rather than the 60-year-olds,
Mhm.
because of the time horizon for their assets, especially if they're in a tax sheltered account. The ability for them to those assets to grow at a higher rate,
Yep.
definitely advantageous for them. Um, I would argue possibly some of the biggest losers would be of this high inflation environment would be not the 60-year-olds, but retirees.
Yeah.
Uh, a very interesting dynamic in the American workforce, and especially for recent American retirees, is that unfortunately, as nature is, generally speaking, one spouse will pass away before the other, which results in a doubling of per person assets, as a result of all of that going to just one person. And that has a very big impact on how um, both their children, because elderly people will be able to hand off their wealth to their children. However, due to the income inequality within the United States, there is a real split, with many older people being unable to continue to afford the sustained inflation that we're seeing. And we are also seeing another much smaller group of older people, their wealth massively exploding. And in part, that is because of how much of their wealth is in tax sheltered accounts.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of things I wanted to mention is you mentioned the younger generation is feeling that their dollar probably isn't going far, and they are dealing with expensive rent and food. But I still want to make sure that we take the time to explain to our listeners, if you are a little bit younger, even if you are going to put money aside in your Roth IRA or your HSA, and just a few $100s a year or a few $1,000s a year can really go a long way because you have time on your hands and you have that compound interest. So we want to make sure that our listeners are putting aside as much as they can. Of course, credit card interest is crazy. We know how expensive everything is. So you want to make sure you're budgeting correctly. But just if you can, get funds into these tax sheltered accounts, because that compound interest, no capital gains, that's going to really drive your account to, the big bucks.
Absolutely. And another important thing to keep in mind is when you're thinking ahead for your future, it's not always just for your future. It could be the future for, your children or grandchildren. So also important to remember to, always include beneficiaries
Yes.
on accounts when you're establishing them, and also remembering sometimes your retirement account isn't just for you. It
Yes.
could also be for your loved ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we have our clients, they will list their spouses, their children. You could list a primary, a contingent, and a lot of our clients also will list their trust as a beneficiary as well. So yes, the reason that we want to do this is money for ourselves, but I think leaving behind that legacy, and especially if it's a Roth IRA, then those beneficiaries don't have to pay taxes on that, which is huge.
Absolutely.
So if grandpa left you some funds within his IRA and unfortunately he passed away, Uncle Sam is going to get a cut of that if he left behind a traditional IRA. So another reason to convert to a Roth if you can. So the beneficiary is left with a truly tax-free account.
Absolutely. One other thing that I've been thinking has been very interesting, particularly when looking at the government spending and the inflation outlook picture, is the so-called Department of Government Efficiency that has been all over the news in the past few weeks. I think it's worth taking a moment to just dive into this a little bit deeper, because I do believe that the Department of Government Efficiency is going to be able to be created through an act of Congress. As I've said a few times before, the Republicans control both the House and the Senate. So I believe that they will actually be able to establish it as a government agency. I am far more skeptical on the Department of Government Efficiency's ability to actually reduce any government spending. I think it's probably more than likely going to be increasing government spending. So I think this is kind of just one more factor to take to account, that even with slightly lower taxes, it's very unlikely that that the inflation rate going into 2025 and beyond is going to be substantially lower than what we have experienced in the past few years. And what we have experienced in the past few years has been remarkable inflation, with a lot of people being, concerned on everything from groceries to making education and car purchases, for example.
Yeah, 100% right about that.
I think another important way of looking at who benefits is not just at the age of the individuals and looking at it from a demographic angle, but also looking at it from a more of a asset class angle.
Yeah, let's look at that too.
So something that I find very interesting is how there is a divergence between older and younger Americans in the choice of asset classes that they will put their hard-earned money in.
Hmm.
Older people, in particular, are bigger fans of gold and real estate. Real estate, in particular, of course, there are much higher upfront costs associated with that. So the longevity to be able to build up the nest egg within your retirement account to be able to purchase real estate does require some more time. However, older Americans are also far more likely to be invested into things like T-notes, T-bills, and T-bonds, which are less uh, lower yielding assets when compared with real estate in particular.
Mhm.
And that is in strong contrast to younger Americans, who are far more likely to both be retail investors in general in the stock market, as well as invest in just asset classes such as crypto.
Yeah.
So I do think that is a very interesting thing to look at. That said, as we had mentioned before, I do believe that we are going to be seeing in the second Trump administration some preferential treatment towards those particular asset classes. Like I said, crypto and anything that is highly energy intensive or is natural resource exploitation. So I think that we will likely see that.
Yeah, and if someone were interested in exploring some of these different asset classes, because I agree with you, seeing our clients and looking at the clientele and their investment choices, I think you're pretty spot on. But if we do have some listeners who are looking to maybe learn a little bit more about crypto or precious metals, do we provide information for them on our website, or like what can they do if they have just general questions? Maybe they haven't identified the investment quite yet, but just want to ask a few general questions. What can they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So on our website, we have a page called Investors Row. It is a catalog of a variety of different investments of different asset types, asset classes, accredited and non-accredited investors. So that is a great resource for anyone that is looking to learn a little bit more about the options available for a self-directed account. I would also just like to say that we have videos available on our website, and particularly for any younger listeners to this, I would strongly recommend taking a look at IRA Club's retirement account, retirement calculator.
Yes.
I find that very useful. I am able to input how much I am saving for my retirement currently, and I'm able to kind of project ahead. And that is very useful for me for thinking ahead.
Yeah, that retirement calculator is very powerful. You can see the difference between putting, funds in a regular account versus a tax sheltered account, a traditional account versus a Roth account. So it really is very powerful, and you can see what your future can look like. Another thing I wanted to mention, we have the videos, like you said, Investors Row. We have a lot of blogs too that Dennis wrote. And what I like about the blogs that Dennis writes is he puts pros and cons. So reasons why you should and shouldn't invest in gold or cryptocurrency, because again, we're not financial advisors. We're not going to make those decisions for the client, and we want the client to be really well informed about investing in crypto, tech, oil and gas, life settlements, real estate. So there are pros and cons to everything, and I think that it's important that the investor educates themselves and calls us and asks questions and does a little bit of research on their own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. Great. So what else can we talk about as far as politics? And we talked a little bit about just the changes and inflation and demographics. What else did you want to tell our listeners?
So one, I had made a few claims that a few people might want to hear a little bit more about. I mentioned that certain asset classes would be given preferential treatment. I don't necessarily think I had explained why.
Yeah.
And to do so, I'm going to look at it more of a conceptual look at how the 2024 election went when compared to 2016 and 2020. And I think that helps explain that's certainly part of why certain asset classes might do better than others. So, of course, Elon Musk was a major supporter of the Donald Trump 2024 campaign. And as a result of that, the crypto community more or less supported Trump pretty consistently, to the degree that they would benefit more financially under a Trump administration than they would under a Harris administration. And taking into account the fact that Trump gained with young men in particular, young men are much more likely to invest into crypto. So there's a bit of a positive feedback loop there, as well as Donald Trump making gains with men in general, with white people in general, with Hispanic people in general, and particularly in the over 65 demographic.
Interesting.
And I do find that very interesting that the over 65 demographic, Trump won this point by about 3% more. I believe he got about 53% in 2024 versus about 50% in 2020. I find that interesting as everyone is 4 years older when compared with 2020.
Yeah.
And I see that as people who have been more impacted by inflation over the past few years, uh, being receptive to that on a political level and voting for an alternative to the incumbent as a result.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, Dan. So it sounds a little bit like taxes are going down, but from my understanding, tariffs might be going up. Is that right?
My guess is as good as yours, but to my understanding, that is what the president-elect would like to have occur. Specifically, I am of the opinion that the majority of the tariffs that Donald Trump is talking about are negotiating tactics, particularly with NAFTA, with Japan, with Taiwan. I view the threat of tariffs really as a negotiating tactic to give him and to give his new United States Trade Representative Jameson Greer a leg up at the time of those negotiations. As Donald Trump has said multiple times that he would like to negotiate almost every single trade deal that the United States has. And I do see the tariff threat as far more substantial and substantiated when looking at Europe and China in particular. I think it's likely that Europe will be hit with tariffs, particularly in the agricultural space, and I think it's more likely that China will be hit with tariffs specifically in the manufacturing space. And I think this is extremely important because this is going to really kind of change the world of what finance has actually looked like and what cross-border financial movements have looked like. At part of what Donald Trump is talking about with his tariffs is not just on tariffs from, French or Romanian wheat or on Chinese electric vehicles. Part of it would also be on American money invested outside of the United States. You can functionally tariff money that is coming in and out of the United States, as IRA Club does have a few clients that live outside of the United States, and I'm sure they would love to tell you how much they love paying taxes both for the United States and for the country that they live in for their income taxes. And so investments could possibly work in a similar fashion. And so I think that that is something that's very important to keep into account, especially when we want to look at who the winners and losers within the United States might be. I think it's very likely that small caps within the United States are going to do incredibly well. I'm looking at mid caps with the Russell 2000, and it has been doing okay since the election. I believe that US centric businesses are going to be doing extremely well. And I think that businesses that do more business overseas are going to have a tougher time as a result of these tariffs.
Yep.
And lastly, I believe that businesses that have been considered to be quote unquote more regulated, in my mind, on that is the oil industry, that is crypto to an extent, that is certainly the private banking sector, are likely to be winners from the Trump administration, as well as anything that is energy intensive due to cheap energy in the United States. And just to reiterate, all of these assets that I have listed off are all assets that our IRA clients are freely able to invest into if they see fit.
Yep, absolutely. And another thing I wanted to mention is you talked about businesses and businesses in the United States. So we are now offering business plans for small businesses. So if you have a business with 200 employees or less, we are now able to offer that. Besides the solo 401k and a SEP IRA that an individual could have, we are now opening up the opportunities for self-directing retirement funds for small businesses.
I know, very exciting.
Dan, I just, before I wrap up, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to give our listeners one piece of advice. And then what I'll do is I will kind of maybe explain the process to our listeners and what the next steps look like. But if you just wanted to give a little tip to our listeners for the end of the year, end of 2024 and beginning of 2025, what is your tip of the day?
Absolutely. My tip would be to make sure that you are always doing your due diligence for any investments that you will be making, and to make sure that you get your contributions in by it. If you don't get it in by the end of the year, for most account types, you can get it in by tax day of 2025, and it will still be counted towards a 2024 contribution.
Perfect. Yes, I want to piggyback on that. So I know this was a lot of information. And again, as we mentioned at all these podcasts, is we're here to assist you and answer questions and help guide you along the process. Again, we're not going to recommend investments or manage your accounts, but we are here to assist you and help administer those accounts. So as Dan mentioned, I think the most important thing to do is try to make your contribution. I know the holidays are coming up and we're probably racking up our credit cards with all these gifts and festivities. And we are also trying to buy groceries for, not a lot in the grocery bag. So it's really important to also think of your future self and putting money aside, hopefully in a Roth IRA, if you'd like, or if you do need a tax deduction, a traditional could be a great option because traditional IRAs can be tax deductible. So definitely making your contribution. I like to do them before the end of the year, just so I know that that was for 2024. But as Dan mentioned, the IRS does give you a couple extra months so you can contribute until tax day. So if you can, go ahead and make your contribution to an IRA, an HSA, or a cover doll plan, because again, those are tax sheltered accounts. And then do your research, right? So you could go to our website, like you said, look at the videos, read Dennis's blogs. If you want, give us a call in the office. One thing that we really want to do is make sure that you take the time to book your one-on-one consultation, and that could be with Dan, with myself, with Mandy, with Ramez. So if you go to iraclub.com, in the upper right-hand section, there's a schedule call button. So go ahead and you'll see our faces. Go ahead and click on that, and we can keep the dialogue going. And then the other thing that I want to make sure that our listeners are aware of is that, if you need something to do during winter break, you want to read this book next to the cozy fireplace. This is Dennis's latest book, Money Making Ideas for Your IRA or Solo 401k. And we are giving everyone a free digital copy. If you'd like, I can mail this to you. Give me a call and I'll mail it to your house. You can put it under your Christmas tree or your stocking. So again, this is a great book. It's not too thick. Just nice bite-sized tips for your retirement funds. But I just wanted to thank Dan for being here. I've learned something today. I hope you did too. And again, we might separate politics and our IRAs, but I think a lot of these changes happening, and they happen every few years. It's important to keep a pulse on it, so you could maybe make some different financial choices and really kind of think about your asset classes. When it comes to real estate, looking at demographics. We just want to thank you for being here with us and taking the time to listen to us. And we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much, Kasia.
Thanks, Dan.